This is the BBC.
This podcast is supported by advertising outside the UK.
You're listening to a podcast from BBC Radio 4 with me, Sunil Khilnani. Welcome to Incarnations, the story of India told through the lives of 50 individuals from ancient to modern who've helped to make the world's biggest democracy what it is today. This is Amir Khusro, the Parrot of India. Night's just falling over a green and tranquil stretch of South Delhi. One of those enclaves where you see ranks of Audis and BMWs behind driveway gates. You'd never guess, standing outside the luxurious Oberoi Hotel, that you're a short walk away across a busy flyover and down byways and gullies from the still beating heart of a medieval city.
There is a prosperous and populous city where fragments of moon gleam at every turn. Each fragment holds a shard of my shattered heart.
Now we're in a crowded, canopied section, and it feels as if we're walking through a tunnel. Past stalls selling prayer caps and shawls, rose petals and kebabs. The people around me are getting conspicuously poorer, and some of them are begging for alms. And we're all starting to walk a little faster now as we approach the green archway that leads into the filigreed screens surrounding the tomb or dargah of the great poet Amir Khusro. Each Thursday, beside this Sufi Muslim shrine, musicians in shimmering turquoise kurtas, their fingers bejeweled in bling, perform what is said to be Khusro's Qawwalis. The world of the 13th century Delhi poet feels close at hand. The molecular cuisine restaurants of South Delhi, the status handbag shops with their Lady Gaga soundtracks, they're what feel far away. Khusro's Sufi poems, composed in Persian or in the oral tradition of Hindavi, the precursor to modern-day Urdu, seemed so artfully to integrate the traditions of Sufi Islam and Hindu India that the founding fathers of modern India made him a mascot of cultural harmony. But his style wasn't about reconciling differences between Hindu and Muslim cultures. Rather, it spoke across beliefs and traditions. And his tomb in the city he loved is very much a living shrine to people of many backgrounds. And like his poetry, Khusro was himself a marvel of cultural, linguistic, and social dexterity. Amir Khusro called himself Tuti-i-Hind, the Parrot of India. A typically ambiguous title, it hints at his ability to flit between multiple roles and voices during his long life. By turns warrior, court poet, and passionate Sufi devotee, he was above all a quick-witted literary survivor. His sensitivity to the tastes of all manner of patrons and audiences, added to his faith in Sufism, would help his words endure for 700 years.
Here is an intellectual giant with such multifaceted personality.
Poet and songwriter Javed Akhtar is one of the legends of contemporary Indian cinema.
Because this concept of Sufi poetry, this concept of amalgamation of such dialect and a language called Urdu, it has all started from Khusro. So now what he started, we have internalized it so much that we are not even conscious that we are doing it.
From Khusro's own writing, we know that his father came from the Turkic regions of Central Asia, possibly as a slave. Khusro's mother, a Hindu, had converted to Islam when they married. A decade or so later, though, her husband died in battle. Their precocious second son, now 8, was sent to live with his prosperous grandfather. And there, the story goes, he met a man who would eventually change his life. Nizamuddin Aulia, one of the great saints of India's Sufi Muslim tradition, was born in the same region as Khusro's father.
According to tradition, Amir Khusro meets Nizamuddin Aulia when he's a child, and even as a kind of a child protege, if you like, a kind of a medieval Persian Mozart.
Now Green is professor of history at UCLA.
He's said to have said to Nizamuddin the Saint as a child, to have improvised the verse, Tu an shahi ki bar iwani qasrat kabutargar nashinad bazgardad.
You are the great king that, if a pigeon should sit on the roof of his palace, it will become a hawk.
Khusro seems to have begun writing early, but to make a living, he followed his father's example and became a fighter for Muslim rule. Khusro took part in several campaigns against the Mongols and for the expansion of Islam, before he was captured and imprisoned. Eventually, though, he escaped and returned to Delhi. There, he transformed himself from soldier to poet. He used his family connections to join the Shahi Majlis, royal gatherings where, in the company of musicians and young boys, poets were often extemporizing, competing with one another in a sort of medieval poetry slam.
The king and his closest other companions gathering round, no doubt drinking wine, a great deal of wine. Amir Khusro or other Nadims, other companions, would simply improvise on a theme that the Sultan or another patron would throw out. Say, improvise me a poem on the mole on the cheek of this beautiful boy sitting here. And they would immediately have to improvise in that way. And if it was a good line, a good bait, a good couplet, then perhaps the king would throw the poet a gold coin or two.
These pure Hindu boys have caused me to go to ruin and to drink. Ensnared in their curly tresses, Khusro is like a dog with a collar.
Khusro was entertaining royals at a particularly tumultuous period in the history of Delhi. In his adulthood, 5 sultans would rise and fall. But as he sycophantically celebrated the virtues of patron after patron, he was invited to join ever larger courts. The last one he served was centered here at Tughlaqabad, a grand desolate fortscape now absorbed into Delhi's relentless sprawl and under the flight path of its ever-busy airport. These were places rife with feuds, betrayals, and murder, not the best environments for writerly contemplation. Still, somehow, he continued to experiment and invent in his work. Soon he became the most admired court poet of his time. But his own words suggest a kind of burnout. He wrote of being enslaved to his patrons' feet, of drinking their dregs. The parrot of India was rich, much admired, and seemingly depressed.
Composing panegyric kills the heart, even if the poetry is fresh and elegant.
Though Amir Khusro is buried at the Dargah, some miles from here, the whole shrine is dedicated not to him, but to the man buried beside Khusro, Nizamuddin. That was the Sufi master I spoke of earlier, the man Khusro first met as a child in his grandfather's house. When Khusro was around 50, he turned to Nizamuddin for spiritual strength. The mystic had a compound, a sort of austere parallel court, in a village on the edges of Delhi, Ghiaspur. There, with Nizamuddin, Khusro had finally found a stable home.
I can't help but think that it's really the stress of that environment that drove Amir Khusro, not as a poet, but as an ordinary human being trying to do his job of work at court, that drove him to the solace and the comfort and the sympathy of that Sufi environment. My sense is that this is a point when He's going through extreme stress and extreme tension.
Sufism flourished in India during the era Khusro lived. It offered mystical unity with God, with different Sufi masters teaching different paths or tariqah. More often now, Khusro called himself a Turki Hindi, an Indian Turk, a signal that the ethnic origins he shared with his master were becoming more important to him. His work expressed what would come to be seen as the ideal of Sufi devotion, a merging of identity between master and follower. And in some of the lyrics you find that sense of equality of relationship, of rich friendship, just unimaginable with the sultans he served.
I have become you. You have become me. I have become life. You have become body. From now on, let no one say that I am other and you are another.
But even more than Khusro's poems of Sufi devotion or his Persian verses, it's his songs which made him famous. The qawwalis and ghazals attributed to him and passed down through 7 centuries by oral tradition. In the decades after India's independence, many of them became staples of Indian cinema. And across North India, people still turn for comfort to the melancholic beauty of Amir Khusro's songs. So, a Sufi Muslim who lived 700 years ago has, through song and cinema, come to live in the unconscious of millions of Indians. Ironically, many of these songs might not actually have been written by him, but still, Khusro has become an embodiment of the nation's unofficial motto, unity in diversity. When Gandhi listened to Hindu and Muslim musicians playing together, he would ask, when will we see the same fraternal union in other affairs? Here in Delhi, in advance of elections, tensions between religious communities are being exploited. Newspapers tell of riots over the desecration of a mosque, reports of a church destroyed and of forced conversions in neighboring states. The world of cultural amalgamation and mixing that some see Khusro as having inspired, that seems illusory, unnecessary to many people in power today. That's a troubling thought, and one that makes me reach back for Khusro's artful straddling of awkward differences.
If a Khorsani, Greek or Arab comes here, he will not face any problems, for the people will treat him kindly as their own, making him feel happy and at ease.
As I walk away from the medieval shrine and return to the newer parts of Delhi, his faith in the civility of this city rings in my head and has me hoping that he's right. Thank you for listening to Incarnations, a BBC Radio 4 podcast presented by me, Sunil Kilnani. To find out more about the series, go to bbc.co.uk/Radio 4.